Hello and welcome to SoulSpeak, the podcast where we dive into the stories that refuse to stay buried. Tonight we're not just talking about a disappearance, we're talking about a fracture in reality. 10 years ago, on a frozen stretch of Highway 19 in northern New Hampshire, a young nursing student named Lyra Dawson vanished after a minor car crash. Her car was still running, headlights still on, airbags deployed, but Lyra was gone. No blood, no footprints in the snow, just a single red scarf caught in a pine branch, fluttering like a heartbeat against the silence. Some say she ran away, some say she was taken, but there are others who swear that on certain nights, when the wind cuts through the mountains at 3:33 a.m., they still see headlights moving on that road with no driver. Was it an abduction, a cover-up, or something older, something that feeds on guilt, lies, and the people who carry them too long? I'm your host, Jonah Quinn, and this is SoulSpeak, the road behind the truth. Because sometimes, the missing don't just vanish, they cross over to somewhere our rules no longer apply. At 9:47 p.m. on a frozen Wednesday night in December, Lyra Dawson sent an email that would become the last proof of her existence. Dear Professor Hensley, I'll be away from campus for about a week. Family emergency. Polite, brief, unquestioned. The kind of message that would slip through any inbox unnoticed. Except that Lyra Dawson didn't have any family left in New Hampshire. Her mother had died of heart failure when Lyra was 14. Her father had moved to Oregon 3 years ago. Her older brother was in rehab somewhere in Nevada, where she hadn't spoken to him in months. And yet, she packed 2 sweaters, a laptop, an old paper map, and left St. Mary's University before sunset. Witnesses remembered her walking across the dorm parking lot, her head down, her dark hair tucked into a red scarf. The December wind clawed at her coat, scattering snow across the pavement, but she never hesitated. She got into her black Subaru Forester and drove east, toward the mountains. No one saw her again. The Subaru was last caught on traffic cam at 6:57 p.m., pulling into a small gas station off Highway 19 in Franconia, New Hampshire. Inside, the cameras showed a nearly empty store, racks of dusty snacks, a single humming refrigerator, the flicker of yellow fluorescent light. Lyra bought 2 bottles of cheap red wine, a lighter, and a postcard of Mount Lafayette blanketed in snow. She asked for a pen, then wrote something on the postcard before flipping it over and slipping it into her jacket pocket. The cashier, 20-year-old Benji Lowell, said later she seemed calm but somewhere else. When asked if she appeared nervous, he said no more, like someone following directions in her head. She smiled once before leaving. That was the last image ever recorded of her. 3 hours later, a state trooper found her Subaru abandoned on the shoulder of the Concomagus Highway, also known as the Road of the Missing. The car was still running, the headlights burned through a wall of fog, and the driver's door was open. There was no blood, no footprints, no tire marks leading away, just a red scarf tangled in the branches of a nearby pine, fluttering in the icy wind. The investigation started simple. Missing person, possible hypothermia, maybe suicide, but none of it fit. Lyra's wallet, phone, laptop all inside the car, the keys still in the ignition. Her phone was dead, but the last saved location was the gas station. The laptop was open on the passenger seat, displaying 2 tabs. One was a 1993 article about a missing hiker named Evelyn Crane. The other, a Reddit forum titled The 333 Signal. If you hear it, don't answer. The thread was gone by the time police checked. Her roommate, Dana Fletcher, told officers that Lyra had been obsessed with the Crane disappearance for weeks. She'd been working on a research project for her psychology class, exploring the connection between trauma and physical geography. She said some places remember pain, Dana explained. She thought Highway 19 was one of them, like a scar in the land. Detectives searched the dorm room and found what she meant. Pinned above Lyra's desk was a topographic map of New Hampshire, covered in red ink, circles 6 in total. Each circle matched the site of a disappearance over the last 30 years, all along the same road. The last circle, drawn darker than the rest, was labeled with that night's date. By morning, state police were sweeping the woods. Drones, dogs, snowmobiles, nothing. The ground was frozen, solid, no sign of struggle, no broken branches, no footprints. It was as if she'd stepped out of the car and evaporated into the cold air. Detective Cole Merritt was the first to notice something strange about the scene. The engine was still warm when he arrived, but the car clock read 3:33 a.m. hours after it had been left there. The time couldn't be right. The Subaru's battery would have died long before that. Yet when the tow truck brought it in, the clock still displayed 3:33. It couldn't be reset. Every time someone tried, it froze again on the same numbers. Lyra's phone records offered little. The last outgoing signal was an unfinished voicemail at 11:06 p.m. You could hear her breathing, the sound of windshield wipers, static breaking through her words. If I don't make it back, tell them the road hums when it's ready. Tell them 3:33 isn't a time, it's an opening. Merritt didn't believe in supernatural nonsense, but something about the case unsettled him. He'd grown up near. His mother used to tell stories about that highway, the whispers you could hear under the wind. The old local legend that said time bends in the mountains after midnight. The road remembers, she'd said once. He hadn't thought of that in years. 3 nights later, the gas station clerk called 911. His voice shook on the recording. He claimed he'd just seen Lyra's car drive past the station again. Same license plate, same model. The problem was, the Subaru had been impounded 30 miles away. It was her car, he insisted. One headlight was out. She was in the driver's seat, but she wasn't moving, just ... sitting there like she was asleep. He said it passed at exactly 3:33 a.m. They checked the camera footage. Sure enough, headlights appeared at that exact time. The car's shape matched Lyra's Subaru, but the image was distorted, blurry, stretched, as if the frame had been pulled out of alignment. No driver was visible. The timestamp on the recording glitched twice, then jumped backward for seconds before freezing entirely. Merritt had the footage analyzed by the FBI's cyber division. Their report called it a signal interference anomaly. Privately, one of the technicians told him something else. That distortion wasn't caused by bad video. It's more like the car was moving faster than the camera could process. Like time skipped. 2 months later, the Postal Service in Franconia received an envelope with no return address. Inside was the same postcard of Mount Lafayette, the one Lyra bought the night she vanished. On the back, 3 words were written in her handwriting. It wasn't snow. The ink had bled slightly, as though the card had been wet. Forensics found traces of chlorine on it, the same type used in industrial disinfectants and morgue preservation rooms. The postmark was smudged, unreadable. After that, the case went cold. The police listed Lyra Dawson as missing, presumed deceased. The university held a memorial service in March, with professors reading her unfinished paper on memory and geography. Her father flew in from Oregon but refused to speak. He left before the service ended, but Detective Merritt didn't stop. He kept the postcard locked in his desk, returning to it every few months like a secret he couldn't burn. The more he studied the handwriting, the more he felt something wrong about it, like the letters weren't written by a human hand but traced from a memory of one. He started dreaming about the highway, about headlights that never reached their destination. In one dream, he stood beside the abandoned Subaru, and a woman's voice whispered through the static of his police radio. It wasn't snow. When he woke up, his alarm clock read 3:33 a.m. 6 months later. A new case landed on his desk. Another missing driver. Same highway, same pattern. This time, the dashcam footage showed something different. A faint flicker of light in the middle of the road, circular, pulsing like a heartbeat. The timestamp glitched for exactly 3 seconds. The last frame before the video went dark showed the driver's terrified face, and behind him, in the rearview mirror, the faint reflection of a woman with a red scarf. No one could explain it. But for those who live near the mountains, the story of Lyra Dawson has become something else, a warning whispered to late-night travelers. They say that if you see a pair of headlights on Route 19 that never pass you, if your radio hums without a signal, if the dashboard clock freezes on 3:33, don't stop. Don't look back, because some roads don't lead anywhere. They take you. And sometimes, they send something back. The snow that night came down like ash, silent and endless, blanketing the highway until the road disappeared beneath it. The white mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks swallowed by fog. It was a night meant for staying home, not driving alone through the cold. But Lyra Dawson didn't seem to care. Her Subaru cut through the dark with its headlights slicing the snow, tires crunching over the ice-packed asphalt. The wind howled like something alive. Her phone, connected to the car stereo, played a low hum from an old recording, one she'd found on a deleted message board. It was faint at first, then pulsed in rhythm with the engine. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, pause, like a coded signal. She didn't turn it off. The road was empty except for the swirling snowflakes and the reflection of her own headlights in the windshield. Then, out of nowhere, the radio cut to static, and the headlights flickered. For a second, the whole world went black. When the light came back, there was something on the road, a shadow, human-shaped, standing still in the middle of the lane. She swerved. The car skidded sideways. the tires lost traction, and the Subaru spun, slamming nose first into a bank of snow. The airbag exploded with a muffled thud, and the cabin filled with white powder. The world went still again. Her hands trembled as she unclipped her seatbelt. Her heart hammered in her chest, loud and uneven. She looked up through the cracked windshield, expecting to see someone, the shadow, the figure, but there was nothing there, just snow falling so thick it seemed to eat the headlights. She fumbled for her phone, but it had flown somewhere under the passenger seat. Before she could reach it, a beam of light swept across her car. A truck was slowing down, its engine growling deep through the cold air. It stopped a few yards behind her. The door creaked open, and a man stepped out, tall, shoulders broad under a heavy flannel jacket. His boots crunched in the snow as he walked toward her window. "You all right in there?" he called out, his voice muffled under the storm. She cracked her window just enough to speak. "I'm fine," she said quickly. "Just lost control." He leaned closer, his breath steaming against the glass. "You want me to call highway patrol? It's slick out here tonight." "No," she said sharply. "Please don't. I'm okay." The man hesitated. His eyes flicked toward the front of the car where the hood was half buried in snow, steam rising from the grill. "You sure?" "Yes," she said. "I just need a minute." He studied her for a long moment, long enough to notice the wine bottles on the passenger seat. The paper map spread open across her lap with red circles drawn across it. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, Miss Burr, if you change your mind, there's a service station about 15 miles back. Name's Harlan." He took a step backward, then paused again. "You be careful. This road's meaner than it looks." He turned and walked back to his truck. The taillights glowed red for a few seconds before the snow swallowed them whole. Inside the Subaru, Lyra exhaled shakily. She looked down at the map again, tracing one of the circles with her finger. The lines seemed to blur under the dim cabin light, almost pulsing faintly, as if the ink was still wet. Then, from somewhere beyond the car, a sound, low, vibrating, almost like a hum, rolled through the night. She froze. It was coming from the woods. When the state troopers arrived 12 minutes later, they found the Subaru still idling, the driver's door open, and the headlights blazing into the trees. The snow around the car was undisturbed. No footprints, no drag marks, no sign of anyone having walked away. The only thing lying in the snow was a red scarf, tangled around a fallen branch, its fabric stiff and frozen. Trooper Emily Carr knelt to pick it up, brushing frost from the fibers. "This hers?" she asked her partner. Detective Merritt nodded slowly, same color she wore when she left campus. He stared into the woods, the beam of his flashlight fading after only a few feet. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No wind, no animals, just the faint hum of the Subaru's engine. They found Lyra's phone half buried under the passenger seat, screen cracked, battery drained. The last photo taken was time-stamped 10:54 p.m., a blurred image of snow and taillights, followed by a second darker frame that seemed to capture something behind her. The outlines were indistinct, but Merritt swore he could see what looked like a human silhouette standing in the road. The crash data recorder confirmed the car had swerved sharply left. No brakes applied. No skid marks. The onboard GPS froze at the coordinates 44, 1776, minus 71.6 to 19. But when Merritt tried to input them into his patrol tablet, the system crashed. By morning. The storm had buried most of the scene. Only the scarf remained visible, the red thread cutting through the white like a wound. Later that week, they tracked down the truck driver Harlan Pierce, 56, from Vermont. He was shaken when he spoke to police. "She looked pale, like she'd seen something," he said. "But I swear she was fine. She didn't want help. Said she just needed a minute." Merritt asked if he'd seen anyone else on the road that night. Harlan hesitated, glancing down at his hands. "There was something," he said quietly. "When I drove away, my headlights hit the trees. I thought I saw someone standing between them. Could have been a trick of the snow. I don't know, but it looked like she wasn't alone." When Merritt pressed him, Harlan added one more detail. "I checked my dashcam the next morning. The footage from that part of the drive gone just static for 3 minutes. Starts back up again at 3:33 a.m. That timestamp would appear again and again throughout the case, on Lyra's car clock, on security cameras, even on her laptop files. It was as if time itself had stuttered in those woods, skipping over something it couldn't record. Weeks later, search teams combed the forest near the crash site. They found nothing, no footprints, no blood, no torn clothing. But deep in the trees, at a spot where the snow hadn't melted even in early spring, they discovered a piece of paper trapped under a layer of ice. It was torn from the same map Lyra had carried. On it, in faint pencil marks, Someone had drawn another circle smaller than the rest, right where the crash happened, and next to it, 3 words were written in her handwriting. It was waiting. From that night on, drivers along Route 19 began reporting strange phenomena: headlights flickering for no reason, radio static, forming patterns, cell phones freezing at 3:33 a.m. A few claimed to have seen a figure standing at the roads, young woman with dark hair and a red scarf, waving for help. But when anyone stopped, Cher was gone. Detective Merritt would return to the crash site dozens of times that winter, always after midnight, always alone. He would stand by the tree where the scarf was found and listen to the silence. Sometimes, he swore he could hear the faint hum again. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats, like something buried under the snow. Still breathing. The official report called it an accident followed by probable hypothermia. The file was closed within 6 months. But Merritt kept a photo of the scene pinned above his desk, the car half buried in snow, the scarf fluttering in the wind, the forest behind it stretching into darkness. Sometimes, when the office lights flickered and the clock on the wall froze at 3:33, he'd glance at the photo and think he saw movement in the trees. He never told anyone. For 3 days, the search for Lyra Dawson turned the White Mountains into a grid of flashing lights and tire tracks. The air never rose above 10 degrees below zero. Snow packed down in layers, hard as marble. Officers moved in lines, their voices muffled by the wind, their breath crystallizing in the dark. The dogs worked first, German shepherds trained for scent, detection sniffing along the frozen shoulder of Route 19 where her Subaru had crashed. At first they caught the trail, the driver's seat, the scarf, the tree line. But then, just a few yards past the ditch, the scent stopped, dead, as if it had been erased from the air. The handlers led the dogs across both sides of the road, into the woods, over the ice. Nothing. The animals circled once, wind, and sat down in confusion. It was like Lyra had simply vanished or stepped into something that didn't belong to this world. Detective Cole Merritt stood by the Subaru, his boots frozen to the ground, watching the dogs fail again and again. "It stops right here," the handler said, pointing to the center of the lane. "Like she got into another car." Merritt frowned. "We'd see tracks, but there weren't any. Not from another vehicle, not from footsteps. The snow was untouched except for the rescue team's own prints. The highway stretched empty in both directions, a line of black ice vanishing into fog. By the end of the 3rd day, morale had collapsed. The frost bit through gloves and boots. Equipment batteries froze and died. Drones fell from the sky It wasn't just the weather, it was the way the air felt heavy, charged, like static before a lightning strike. Merritt couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched from the tree line, even though the forest was still. "We're calling it," the sheriff said finally. "No sign of foul play. We'll regroup in spring." Merritt didn't argue, but he didn't leave either. He stood there long after the others drove off, his breath rising like smoke, staring at the faint outline of tire marks buried in snow. Lyra's father, Simon Dawson, arrived the next morning from Oregon, a retired civil engineer, 61 years old, thin from years of long shifts and coffee dinners. He wore a heavy wool coat and carried a file folder of his daughter's photos. "She didn't run away," he said before anyone could speak. His voice was steady but brittle, "and she didn't kill herself." Merritt tried to temper him gently, but Simon cut him off. "Lyra called me a week before she disappeared," he said. "She was scared of something, said she kept hearing a hum outside her window at night, like power lines, but lower." He handed Merritt a printed phone log, his own copy from the carrier. "There's a call from her phone at 3:02 a.m. the night she went missing," Simon said. "Look." The number was listed as unknown. Duration, 47 seconds. The audio file had been wiped from the device by the time investigators retrieved it. "I tried calling back," Simon said. "It rang once, then went dead. The next morning, she was gone." When Merritt asked if Lyra had mentioned anyone new, Simon hesitated. "There was a man," he said finally. "She didn't give a name. She said he was helping her with a research project. Sounded older. Said he'd seen the lights too." He stopped there, realizing how it sounded. "Look, detective, I know this sounds crazy, but she was my daughter. She didn't make things up." That night, Merritt reviewed every traffic cam along Route 19 between 9 p.m. and 3:30 a.m. Most were dead, covered by snow. Power lines down, but one, at mile marker 42, flickered back to life for 20 seconds. Around 3:11 a.m. the footage showed the highway, empty except for blowing snow. Then, just as the feed began to glitch, faint headlights appeared in the distance. They flickered once, twice, then split. One set of lights became 2, then 3, overlapping like echoes of the same car. The image froze, pixelated, then jumped to static. When the signal returned, the road was empty again. Merritt leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The clock on his desk read 3:33 a.m. He blinked, looked again. The second hand wasn't moving. Simon stayed in a motel outside Franconia, refusing to go home. Every day he called the police station, offering new theories, new scraps of memory. She wouldn't have gone into the woods, he said over and over. She hated the cold. She wouldn't even go camping as a kid. The detectives were polite, but by the second week the tone had changed. They began to suggest possibilities: unpaid debts, depression, voluntary disappearance. She was under stress, one officer said. Grad school, personal isolation, maybe she wanted to escape. Simon nearly laughed. You didn't know my daughter, he said. She didn't run from things. She chased them. Late one evening, Simon drove to the crash site himself. The road was closed, but he ignored the signs, parking half a mile down and walking in the dark with a flashlight. The air was so cold it burned his lungs. The trees rose tall and black on both sides, branches heavy with frost. He found the spot easily to tire ruts frozen into the ice, a faint scar of impact on the snowbank. The silence was absolute. He knelt beside the spot where the scarf had been found, and ran his fingers through the packed snow. Lyra, he whispered, and then, faintly, he heard it, a vibration under the wind, low, rhythmic, mechanical, not quite a hum, not quite a growl. 3 beats pause, 3 beats pause. It was coming from the trees. He turned his flashlight that way, and the beam cut through the darkness. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then something metallic flashed in the distance, like a reflection. When he took a step closer, the light blinked out. He didn't tell the police about that. He just drove back to the motel, hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the wheel. Meanwhile, Merritt ordered a trace on the unknown number that had called Lyra's phone. The result came back 2 days later. The origin point was listed as no active subscriber. The coordinates matched an abandoned ranger outpost, deep inside the White Mountains. Since 1989, there was no cell tower within 30 miles. Merritt and 2 officers hiked out to the location on snowmobiles. They found the structure half collapsed, eaten by frost and moss. Inside, animal bones and broken glass. On one wall, scratched into the peeling paint, were numbers written over and over again. 333. The radio equipment inside was dead, but the dials were set to a single frequency, 333.0 MHz. Simon wasn't told about the outpost. The report listed it as unrelated, but Merritt started having trouble sleeping. He'd wake to static from the police radio in his living room, faint humming through the floorboards. His wristwatch sometimes froze at 3:33 exactly. He told himself it was stress. By the end of the month, the official narrative hardened. Lyra Dawson had suffered a mental breakdown, fled campus, crashed her car, wandered into the woods, and died of exposure. Her body was never recovered due to severe weather and wildlife activity. Case closed, but Simon refused to sign the closure papers. Someone called her, he said. Someone was waiting. He pulled a photo from his wallet. Lyra at 17. Smiling in front of her high school science fair project about electromagnetic fields. She used to say everything leaves a trace, even what we can't see. Maybe she was right. Before he left New Hampshire, Simon visited the crash site one last time. He placed her photo against the trunk of the pine tree and whispered, "I'll find you." When he turned to leave, a faint shimmer of light flickered through the snow behind him. 2 headlights, far off, cutting through the fog. He froze, watching. They blinked once, twice, then vanished. When he checked his watch, the hands had stopped. 3:33 a.m. Jonah Quinn had been chasing dead stories for years, unsolved disappearances, small-town legends, whispers buried in police reports. He used to think the truth always left a trail, until he found the case of Lyra Dawson. The night he stumbled upon her name, it wasn't through an official report or a source tip. It was a single frame of video sent anonymously to his email with no message, no signature, just a file titled "Don't Look Away." The footage was grainy, black and white, taken from a home security camera facing the stretch of Highway 19 near the crash site. The timestamp read 2:59 a.m., December 12th. The snow fell in thick ribbons, almost blinding the view. Then headlights appeared from the left side of the screen, a silver semi-truck slowing to a stop behind a smaller car. Jonah froze the frame. The license plate was unreadable, but the truck was clearly a Peterbilt 379 with silver paint and a distinctive diagonal scrape across the hood. He watched as the truck idled for a moment, exhaust pooling in the cold air. Then, without warning, the lights blinked twice and went out completely. The video continued for another minute. Static darkness. No movement, and then the feed cut. There was no sign of either vehicle when the footage resumed at 3:34 a.m. Jonah leaned back in his chair, staring at the frozen screen. He'd seen enough true crime footage to know what felt wrong. This wasn't random. The truck hadn't broken down. It had stopped deliberately. He cross-referenced every truck registered in Grafton County that matched the make, color, and pattern. Only one came up, owned by a man named Eli Mercer, 48 years old, living in Bethlehem, New Hampshire. Mercer was no stranger to police records. 5 years earlier he'd been a suspect in the disappearance of a hitchhiker named Abigail Cross, a 19-year-old who vanished after accepting a ride from a truck stop in Vermont. Mercer's rig was impounded, searched, and released when no physical evidence was found. The case was closed for insufficient evidence. Abigail was never found. Jonah dug deeper. Mercer had left trucking shortly after that, working odd jobs in remote towns across northern New England. But one detail stood out. Every place he lived was within 30 miles of one of the 6 red circles Lyra had drawn on her map. Coincidence? Jonah didn't believe in those anymore. He called Merritt, the detective still unofficially obsessed with the Dawson case. "You ever hear of Eli Mercer?" Jonah asked. There was silence on the other end, then a sigh. "Yeah," Merritt said. "We questioned him. He claimed he stopped to help her, said she waved him off. Nothing illegal about that. Except he's done it before," Jonah replied. "Before her there was another girl, and another before that, maybe. He's a ghost in your own files." Merritt's voice hardened. "Be careful what you're implying, Quinn. Some things around here don't like being found." Then the line went dead. By midnight, Jonah had gathered everything he could. Police reports, scanned witness statements, weather logs. He was ready to publish. The story was perfect: an extracur with a violent past, a missing student, a pattern hidden in plain sight. The kind of story that could finally break through the noise. He opened his laptop and started typing, but before he could upload the file, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A voice, calm and steady, said, "You shouldn't have looked at that video." Jonah's heart slammed in his chest. "Who is this?" The line crackled, then went silent. He thought it had disconnected, but the voice came again, softer this time. "You think you're finding the truth, but you're feeding it. Stop digging, Jonah. The road doesn't forget." The call ended. When he replayed his voicemail later, the message was gone, erased. That night, he noticed his front door slightly ajar. He was certain he'd locked it. His cat, normally restless, was hiding under the couch, tail puffed out, hissing at nothing. On his desk, the flash drive containing the footage was missing. In its place was a folded piece of paper, 3 words, written in block letters. It wasn't him. Jonah didn't sleep. He drove straight to the police station at dawn, only to find Merritt waiting in the parking lot, smoking in the freezing air. "You look like hell," the detective said. "You get the same message?" Jonah frowned. "What message?" Merritt flicked his cigarette into the snow. "Forget it." Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Simon Dawson sat alone in his kitchen, sorting through the mail. He had stopped expecting anything useful, just bills and the occasional sympathy card. But that morning, one envelope caught his eye. No return address, postmarked from New Hampshire. He tore it open. Inside was a white postcard, the same kind sold at the gas station where Lyra had last been seen. The front was blank. On the back, written in Lyra's familiar handwriting, were 6 words, "Bahung Tin Vau the Ang Non Thi." His hands shook. The ink was smudged, as if written in haste. The card smelled faintly of metal and smoke. He turned it over again, noticing a faint embossing along the edge, a tiny pattern of circles, barely visible under the light. When he traced them with his fingertip, they felt carved, not printed. 6 circles, the same as the ones on her map. Simon called Merritt immediately. "I just got something," he said. "It's from her." Merritt arrived an hour later, the postcard sealed in an evidence bag. He studied the handwriting carefully. "Looks like her," he said, "but there's something off, like someone copied it." Simon stared at the card, voice breaking. She knew we'd be watching the wrong thing. That night, Simon dreamt of his daughter standing at the edge of a frozen road, her scarf whipping in the wind. She was trying to speak, but the air between them vibrated like static, the sound breaking into pulses. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. When he woke up, his phone's voicemail light was blinking. The message had no sound, just the hum of an idling engine. The timestamp read 3:33 a.m. back in Boston. Jonah drafted his article anyway. He'd already lost the footage, but not the truth. He was going to publish it, all the truck, Mercer, the threats, the postcard. But before he could hit send, his screen flickered. A new file appeared on his desktop, 333.mp4. He opened it. The video showed a dark road, headlights in the distance, and a figure walking toward the camera. The figure stopped, close enough that Jonah could see her face. Pale eyes open but lifeless. It was Lyra. She lifted her hand slowly and pointed behind him. Jonah turned. The room was empty, except for the faint hum of an engine outside his apartment window. He ran to the balcony. The street below was empty, the snow untouched. But as he listened harder, the sound grew louder, closer, until it filled his chest like pressure from within. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. When he looked back at his laptop, the file was gone. The cursor blinked on an empty document, as if waiting. The only thing left was a single line of text, typed in by no one. "You can't expose what doesn't exist." Jonah sat frozen, his breath fogging in the cold air leaking through the window. Somewhere far away, in the dark sprawl of the White Mountains, the road hummed again. And in a small mailbox outside an empty house in Oregon, another postcard was waiting, its message yet unread. 10 years is a long time for the living, but not long enough for the missing. By 2024, the case of Lyra Dawson had become one of those stories that refused to stay buried, part tragedy, part myth, part warning whispered to anyone driving the Concomagus Highway after midnight. Jonah Quinn had stopped covering true crime years ago. The last story he'd ever published was about her, and it had cost him everything: his job, his reputation, his sleep. The deeper he went, the stranger it became. Files vanished, witnesses recanted, and even the detective who once believed him, Cole Merritt, was found dead in his car outside Franconia in 2018, the engine still running. Clock frozen at 3:33 a.m. Jonah never wrote again. He moved south, changed emails, told himself that some stories weren't meant to be told, until the message arrived. It was a quiet Sunday morning when he saw its subject line blanked. No sender address. The email contained only one attachment: bead. 333 MP4. He hesitated, fingers hovering over the mouse. His laptop clock read 3:33 p.m. He almost laughed at the coincidence before realizing it wasn't funny at all. He clicked play. The footage was grainy, shot on an old phone. The image wobbled, autofocused, struggling in the dark. At first, all Jonah could see was a dim room, bare walls, a single light bulb swaying overhead, its filament pulsing faintly. Then a figure stepped into frame. She was thinner now, her hair matted, skin pale as paper, but there was no mistaking the eyes. Lyra Dawson, a live dot. She sat down directly in front of the camera, the glow washing her in ghostly. Her voice trembled, cracked from disuse, but clear. "If you're seeing this, it means they let me record again." She swallowed hard, eyes darting to something beyond the frame. "They don't want me to speak. They don't let me go outside. I don't even know how long I've been here." She leaned closer, whispering, "They told me not to look at the road, but that's not where it is. The truth isn't on the road." She paused, breathing ragged. "It's behind it." The sound that followed made Jonah's blood run cold. A low, mechanical rumble, distant at first, then building, like an engine idling outside the walls. Lyra's eyes widened in terror. "They're here," she whispered. "Please, don't." The video cut to static. Jonah sat frozen, the hum still echoing faintly from his speakers. He replayed the file twice, then 3 times. Each time, the ending shifted by a single frame, as if something in the background was getting closer. He paused the last frame before the cutoff and enhanced it. Behind Lyra, in the blurred darkness, faint streaks of red light reflected off metal headlights. He traced the video metadata. It had been uploaded from an IP address located somewhere along Route 19, the same stretch where she'd vanished. The timestamp on the file, 3:33 a.m. Jonah stared at the screen until his reflection blurred with hers. He should have reported it. He should have called someone. But after 10 years of silence, after a decade of whispers and sleepless nights, he knew there was only one thing left to do. He packed his camera, a thermos of coffee, and drove north. The snow began halfway through Vermont, falling in thick, heavy flakes that swallowed the world in white. By the time he reached Franconia, it was midnight. The road ahead glowed faintly under his headlights, smooth and empty. The sign for mile marker 42 flashed by, a ghostly reminder of where everything began. He slowed down as he saw the familiar bend, the one burned into his mind from police photos and witness statements. He parked on the shoulder, killed the engine, and listened. At first there was nothing. Then, faintly, the same hum he'd heard in the video began to rise from somewhere beneath the snow. 3 beats pause. 3 beats. The same rhythm, the same impossible pulse that tied every thread of the story together. Jonah stepped out into the cold, breath fogging, camera shaking in his hands. The forest loomed on both sides, trees bending under the weight of the storm. He followed the sound, boots crunching through ice, until he reached the exact spot where Lyra's Subaru had been found. The snow was undisturbed, the silence absolute, and then, as if triggered by his presence, the air began to shimmer. Headlights flared in the distance, faint at first, then growing brighter, cutting through the fog. A shape emerged, a silver truck, identical to the one from the old footage. It rolled to a stop without a sound, engine humming low. Jonah raised his camera, zoomed in. The driver's seat was empty. The passenger door opened with a slow creak. A red scarf fluttered out and landed softly in the snow. The hum grew louder. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a new message. He pulled it out. No sender, no subject, just a single sentence. Don't trust what you see. He looked back at the truck. The cab lights flickered. For a brief second, a figure appeared in the driver's seat, thin, pale, hair falling across her face. Lyra, her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear. Jonah took a step closer, his breath catching in his throat. The headlights exploded into white. When his vision cleared, the truck was gone. The road was empty again. Only the red scarf remained half buried in snow. Jonah bent down, picked it up. It was warm to the touch. He stumbled back to his car, heart pounding. The wind howled through the trees, the hum fading into silence. He started the engine, his headlights cutting through the storm. As he pulled onto the road, he glanced once into the rearview mirror, and froze in the back seat. Reflected in the dim light was the red scarf, now draped neatly over the passenger headrest. Jonah didn't look back again. He pressed the accelerator, driving into the blizzard. The hum of an unseen engine following somewhere behind. At exactly 3:33 a.m., his dashcam flickered once and went dark. No one ever saw him again. But sometimes, on nights when the snow falls thick and the wind hums low through the white mountains, truckers swear they see 2 sets of headlights on Route 19, one chasing the other, never catching up. And if you listen closely, beneath the roar of the storm, you might hear a woman's voice whispering through the static. The truth isn't on the road, it's behind it, and that is the story of Lyra Dawson, the girl who vanished into the snow, and maybe never left it. Was she taken, or did she follow something none of us can see? What do you think happened that night? Tell me your theory in the comments. If this story gave you chills, leave a like and don't forget to follow Soulspeak for more mysteries like this one. Until next time, keep your lights on, and if you ever see headlights at 3:33 a.m., don't stop.